Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.9 top lane tier list. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes towards the top lane this patch, bringing up some of the weaker top laners, whether this was through a means of animation fixes or just animation smoothing. Kennen, really big winner of this. And then bringing down some of the top lane, the likes of Urgot has been overperforming for a while, especially within low elo. He's been brought down a bit. Skarner was overperforming, got hotfix nerfed, was actually kind of like in the middle of the pack and then got nerfed again. He's now underperforming, but let's cover the changes. So to begin with, the D tier is still going to consist of Lee Sin and Graves. The notes here are that Graves was bugged when I made the tier list originally on 14.8. He then got hotfix buffed and fixed, so he was no longer receiving negative attack speed on his reload speed. If you built attack speed, that was like a weird interaction with his passive. Graves' passive is worded like weirdly or like coded weirdly, which kind of ended up in this situation. Lee Sin might be bugged this patch. His jungle win rate really shot up. I haven't done a huge amount of digging into this, but with the ASU, I'm pretty sure they might have done something to his Q2 and like massively amplified the damage on that, because a champion whose main core items of like Eclipse, Starrock, Sundered Sky, in such a situation like that, all getting nerfed, should not gain like 3% win rate on a patch. I'm pretty sure he's bugged. He'll probably get hotfix nerfed on a B patch later tonight when they do stuff for TFT as well. They tend to go hand in hand with doing patches for each other. But yeah, in Lee Sin's case, he is bugged, I believe, at the moment, but still not performing very well on the top lane. I wouldn't recommend him as a top lane pick. However, go ahead, play him in the jungle. He's still decent there. Yeah, that wraps up the D tier. I also wanted to make a note about Sejuani. Her pick rate hasn't really increased on top lane this patch. I was kind of hoping that we might see some Sejuani top resurgence. I really liked the pick when it was something which you could opt into a couple seasons back. I believe like 2 seasons back. You ran like Grasp, you ran a Mana Flow, Scorch, so you could be a bit oppressive in laning phase. The problem is the changes kind of pushed her more towards not so much like item scaling rather than level scaling, which doesn't really help a top laner a huge amount unless you are going for more like a carry champion on a tank. That's not really what you want. You want to be able to support your team a lot more. Maybe there's some stuff with like Qmax now, but Wmax incentive is pretty bad, but you still really value that cooldown, so I don't imagine it's going to shift anytime soon. But yeah, still massively underplayed, not really worth adding to the tier list at the moment, but do keep your eyes open. If you play it or see it, let me know how it goes. Moving on to the C tier, I'm going to add Rammus here. I don't know why, but Rammus' play rate has kind of shot up in the top lane. Well, it's always maintained a level, but then this patch, it's actually higher than a decent amount of the top lane tier list. A lot of these have been gradually losing play rate, however. But yeah, Rammus in this case, not really worth picking unless enemy team is full AD, your Malphite isn't open, and then you can maybe lock in Rammus. Still not really that exceptional of a pick. He has some weird gimmicks with a laning phase, being able to like drag people under turret, you're maxing W, maxing E. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend it. Karma received her umpteenth buff at this point. Still not doing enough to help her in the top lane, which I mean, that is the intentions of these buffs. They don't want Karma top to be good. Otherwise it does become a bit oppressive, but once again, amping up her supportive capabilities. She's fine if you're looking for an enchanter in the top lane. There's not a huge amount of options within the pool, but I really wouldn't recommend playing it in a solo queue environment. Maybe in Clash, maybe in Flex, there are options there if you're like very confident in your teammates' capabilities. But yeah, gonna say at the bottom of the C tier still. Cassante, it's pretty close to the D tier. I just wouldn't recommend playing this champion unless you're like very, very proficient at it. You put the games in, and like your high elo, you really understand like the mechanics and stuff like that. Otherwise, you do tend to just run it down with this champion. You'll have more impact on other tanks which can work, which are less mechanical, can work on item spikes a bit easier, scale better, stuff like this. Cassante sits in the C tier at the moment. He feels pretty conky at this point as well. Not what I'd call the greatest champion in its current state. Yeah, so still struggling in the top lane. Once again, you're playing this as like a counterpick to the likes of ranged options and Twisted Fate. That tends to be what you see him as like a more popular pick into. Still doesn't perform very well though. Gets absolutely dumpstered by most bruisers and juggernauts. And yeah, sits within the C tier. Unless you're Dazukil, it tends to be suboptimal to play this champion. Na is also going to sit within the C tier. He's just permanently going to be in a pretty mediocre spot in the top lane. He's functional, but if he's ever oppressive, he becomes a pro staple. They really don't want that. But that is how the champion functions when you're both a ranged lane bully and you're able to team fight and have a lot of frontline capabilities. He sits within the C tier. Rumble, also very elite skewed. Playing this champion outside of Masters tends to be pretty rough. If you fall behind, you really struggle to have impact in the game. But if you're confident, you need an AP damage source, and you're able to utilize his strengths within laning phase. There is a lot of power in this pick, but I wouldn't recommend it as a go-to. He sits within the C tier. Smolder, still being played in the top lane. However, the play rate's almost fizzled out at this point. He has great scaling, but it's kind of the main merit to this. You're still very abusable by most top laners, though, and you can really struggle if you're ever camped. Outside, like, below Masters, you can maybe get away with this, but, like, higher elos, once again, you're really going to get punished for this late game kind of play style. The likes of Kale kind of fall into a similar boat, but she's a bit less hard. She's a bit harder to punish. Akali, also going to sit within the C tier. Akali's a fine top laner. Once again, if you're auto-filled into top and you want to play Akali, still a solid option. There are just better AP options, and you tend to ruin team comps pretty heavily if you do pick Akali in the top lane. This is why you don't tend to see many AP assassins up here. Like, if you want to pick an AP assassin, I'd recommend it mid lane or in the jungle if you're looking at the likes of Eve. I wish to get enough this patch. Fiddlesticks, solid champion in the jungle. But Akali can function in the top lane. Has a very strong level 6 power spike. Of course, Lord Dolby made a video on this talking about the strengths of Akali, how you can like really utilize like power spikes and itemizations and stuff like this. But yeah, she sits within the C tier at the moment. The 30 base health, which she gained last a couple of patches, has definitely put her to the top of the C tier, but not really enough to push her into the B tier. And that wraps up the C tier. Moving on to the B tier, we have Ryze. Ryze is still a very solid option. He got buffed last patch on 14.8, and I put him in a good spot. The W gaining an increased slow, combined with the cooldown going down earlier when it is his last maxed ability, has definitely helped him find a more secure spot in the top lane. His wave clear is decent. His damage still a bit lacking early on, but like definitely becomes quite oppressive later on once you have the likes of your Rabadon spike. I wouldn't really recommend going down like the hybrid tank variations. You're mostly limited to like AP pure builds. But yeah, he's still a solid B tier option. He's not the hardest champion to play in the world, but like a lot of the gimmicks of this pick come down to like ult value, being able to space correctly, which you can really find like a good role, like which a good Ryze will very much like expand upon rather than get punished for. Silas, once again, still gonna be played primarily as a counter pick to the likes of Malphite. Still a solid B2 option. Actually, Riven is going to be put in the C tier. I want to speak about Riven. This champion got punished really hard by the items which she builds being nerfed quite heavily this patch. The likes of Eclipse and the Sky, Sterks all got hit, and she has fallen because of this. More and Death Stance did receive some buffs to try and like compensate some of the nerfs towards champions like Riven, but she still hasn't quite found her footing. She is a very hard champion to play, and she finds herself in the C tier now. Moving on, Rengar also going to be in the B tier. Rengar is still a solid option. I'm pretty sure he is bugged on this patch as well. There is something where if one of your teammates built up Bison and Sky, your crits but when you jump from bushes, your autos will always crit, like which is an insane bug to have within the game, especially if you're aware of this and like you're playing alongside maybe like a Xin Zhao and enemy top is like squishy. There's ways of punishing this, but I wouldn't recommend going and exploiting the game. It's not really worth it in case you get banned. But yeah, there is a bug at the moment with Rengar, but he's still a solid B tier option. Udyr also going to be in the B tier. He's one of the harder to play tanks. I've covered this a couple of times, but yeah, Udyr, relatively difficult to play. You've got to understand wave manipulation. That's one of the key factors, like being able to utilize your ult, walk past towers, stuff like this. Itemize correctly on this champion. Really look at the Liandry's. It tends to perform quite well on this pick, especially if you want to snowball throughout the game. Vladimir has fallen since the beginning of the season, but he's still a solid AP option of the top lane. He's a good answer to certain champions where you can really utilize the value of pool and his scaling nature. But for the most part, he's going to be in the B tier. Jace tends to be one of the more challenging top laners to play. He's a half engage, half poke kind of like skirmisher almost. He can do huge amounts of damage, especially if you are snowballing. I talked about like his build variations, the lethality options. Maybe so you can possibly skip Manamune. Still worth looking into. There are like kind of like there will be people who play Jace who can really understand this. I'd recommend looking at these people, kind of understand what builds they go, how they punish in laning phase, stuff like this, the roams. But yeah, Jace still a solid B tier option. The buffs not too long ago definitely did help him. Twisted Fate is still a solid ranged option within the top lane. He's definitely very elite skewed. This champion is very easy to punish in low elo, especially if you don't space correctly. Like you're running flash ghosts, and if you die early game, it can be super hard to find your way back. Of course, you're still looking at builds like the Kraken Slayer, Storm Razor, really nice on this pick. Especially for the movement speed, RFC for the ranged gold card. But yeah, still lots of merits to this pick. If you do want a range lane bully, he's still a great option, but does tend to be harder to pilot and very punishable. Yone, also going to be in the B tier, also a very punishable pick, especially if you do fall behind. He can be very hard to like find your way back, especially into like counter pick matchups. If you're in a matchup which you dominate, then it can be very beneficial to have this champion. I'd only really recommend playing him in those situations, but still once again struggles 4-5 items. But the likes of Death Stance being buffed has definitely helped in this space. Gives him a solid 4th option alongside Iceborne, but still can kind of struggle. You're still looking at the builds like Kraken Slayer, IE, Shilbo, and then like Death Stance, Iceborne, GA, Witsend possibly is like a substitute option. But yeah, Yone, solid B tier option. Gangplank also going to be in the B tier. Harder to pilot pick. You do really need to be mechanical on this pick to like get value out of it. His strengths comes from his ability to control like spaces throughout the game, like with his barrel placements. His damage is very high. It can be hard to pilot if you do fall behind, especially if you're not able to consistently land barrel combos. If you want to watch someone play Gangplank, watch Solobaka. He's probably one of the best Gangplank players in the world. I can't think of any Western top laner who can play him quite as well. Yeah, that's definitely hard to recommend to watch. And yeah, land the champion. He is good if you do put the games in. Moving on, so Volibear, also going to be in the B tier. Very simplistic, great tower diving top laner. If you do get ahead on this pick, he can be very oppressive. If you fall behind, it's really hard to play. If you can go like the AP route with like the likes of Riftmaker, Nash's Tooth, Hullbreaker for like split pushing value, or you can just go primary tank. There are 2 options. Lethal Tempo, of course, tends to be the route you go if you are going down the AP Nash's Tooth route. If you are going the more tanky route, the likes of Grasp can be quite nice in this space. You also have options in the likes of PTA if you're not able to consistently get Grasp procs. Pantheon, going to be within the B tier. He is still a fine lane bully. Of course, he is still being hit by the fact that the items for Bruce has just got nerfed, and he probably falls closer towards the bottom of the B tier now. Eclipse is now weaker. Sundered Sky, if you went it on him, is weaker. Stoics is weaker. Death Stance is better, but not something you tended to go as much. The lethality options are still fine on Pantheon, and honestly, you can like opt into like lethality options in a significant amount of games, especially against squishier team comps and targets. But for the most part, got hit this patch by the bruiser itemization changes, falls lower towards the bottom of the B tier. Ornn is going to sit within the B tier. He's high B tier. He's still my go. I mean, I love playing Ornn. He's still my go-to tank at the moment. He still struggles with the itemization. Still has a lot of counters within the top lane role. Of course, a lot of the tankier, bruisier options within low elo can punish him quite heavily. The likes of Mordekaiser is a very hard matchup for Ornn. If you're not able to get your items like early on into the game, he's punished by the likes of Aatrox. Darius can win that matchup quite easily. If you do fall behind, Garen can win this matchup. Yeah, like a lot of the popular low elo generalistic mid elo picks do beat Ornn. So do have to be careful of that. Also, the likes of Olaf can run through Ornn, but yeah, he kind of sits within the B tier. If they fix the itemization problem with this champion, I imagine he'd be a lot better, but he's definitely going to benefit from the 14.10 changes, which let me know if you want me to make a video on, because I can cover through all these changes and who they would benefit. That might be something interesting to do. York, actually, I'm not going to cover York because I'm going to move York up. Sauron is going to stay within the B tier. He's still a solid tank AD option. Tends to be a bit harder to pilot than a lot of the other picks, and there are better AD tank options, Mundo, in this space, but yeah, he's still a solid B tier pick. There is still value within his builds, and if you can lane swap within a game, still space there. It can work quite nicely in that situation. Rek'Sai is getting very close to being removed off the tier list. Rek'Sai is not very popular anymore. Like, her play rate is basically non-existent within the top lane. She is absurdly boring to play, like the tanky kind of no impact, like just perma hold your lane kind of play style. She's not bad. Like, she's still a B tier option, and like in elite play tends to be a bit more viable, but yeah, within mid elo, low elo, I honestly wouldn't recommend playing this champion. Like, she's close to C tier, like, here, because you just have no agency over the game, and that can be really hard to like climb with. Gragas also going to win the B tier. He's harder to play than Rek'Sai, but still kind of has the same premise of being a bit of a lane holder. It's very hard to punish a Gragas, especially if he's running the likes of Grasp and Phase Rush. If you're going down like for durable builds with like your Roa, your Seraphs, also can be quite hard to punish him that. But yeah, the main thing here is he's harder to play, but he does have a bit more agency in the game, can carry games playing Gragas, especially if you go like a hybrid tankier AP route. Of course you can go like pure tank, but then you do become more like Rek'Sai, where you just don't really have a lot of impact within the game unless you're like able to really like take advantage and like dominate your laning phase. But yeah, Gragas gonna sit within the B tier. Gwen is also gonna be within the B tier. She is great. She's a great answer into a lot of the tankier options, into a lot of the bruisers. You can really struggle, especially if they are strong early and can just be very oppressive on the wave compared to you. Gwen really reliant on like 2-3 items to really take over games. Into tanks, it tends to be a bit easier to get this as they are less punishing to play against, and her percentage maximum health true damage can really take effect there, especially when it's like hybrid true, hybrid magic, especially if you're running alongside like an AD bruiser jungler, where you can get a lot of value out of this pick. Heimerdinger also going to be in the B tier. He doesn't really have like our problem with Heimerdinger is he's kind of split across 3 roles at the moment, and it just isn't really that performant across any of them. He can function fine within the top lane. Like, if you're able to consistently maintain like wave positions where you want the wave to be, then you can have value, especially if you're running the likes of like the Liandry's builds, stuff like Liandry, Rylai, stuff like that. But he is still not performing great. There are AP options which tend to be a bit better than him and can like find easier success. The likes of Kayle, for example, doesn't have as much impact early on into the game, but definitely can function really nicely mid to late, where you can like have options for like the AD and AP builds. But yeah, Heimerdinger gonna sit within the B tier, not performing the greatest at the moment. Cho'Gath still is a solid B tier pick. He got moved up when his E got buffed not too many patches ago. It definitely gave him a lot more dueling potential and really enabled him to like actually fight a lot of the top laners, which previously he just wouldn't have been able to really stand up to. He still struggles into a lot of the top lane popular picks, so the likes of Mordekaiser, Aatrox, he can really struggle against. I mean, Darius can also be quite painful if you're not able to hold him off like early on into the game. So I mean, if you sit back, then you can kind of function in that laning phase. But yeah, gonna sit within the B tier at the moment. In fact, I'm gonna add Olaf to the B tier. He got nerfed this patch and actually hit him quite heavily. The losing 5 damage off Q and the resists going down on the ultimate definitely meant his value as a like the early game elite kind of like a harasser has definitely fallen a bit. There are still merits to this champion, like the unstoppable nature of his ultimate, where you're able to continuously hold maintain uptime on this against like tanks can be really valuable. It makes him very hard to play, or makes him very good against tanks. That's kind of like what you directly counterpick him against. But he is also elite skewed, and now he falls within the B tier. Quinn is going to start the A tier, so Quinn still a solid AD range top lane option. If you're running like Scorch, you're running Fleet, you can be really oppressive early and it can be quite hard to play against. If you're able to then like leverage this impact across the rest of the map, then there is definitely a lot of value to this pick. She's probably, I mean, she is easier than Twisted Fate to a degree. She's less punishable. She has more map mobility, just from Valor. I mean, Twisted Fate has his ultimate, but that doesn't tend to like have the same level of strengths as Valor within the game, where you can just like perma roam once you shove waves. Quinn gonna find herself within the A tier. Akshan also going within the A tier. He actually kind of stayed relatively neutral, if anything power positive within low to mid elo. The ultimate got buffed quite heavily. In turn, they took some power away from his Q. The minion damage has gone down. The movement speed has gone down on this ability, which are very elite skewed levers, so it definitely hurt him when you are like Masters Plus. But Masters below, the ultimate doing a lot more damage has definitely given it a lot more value. Solid A tier option. Wukong definitely got hit by the bruiser itemization changes this patch, and is honestly probably B tier, A tier, like bottom of A. The Eclipse getting nerfed definitely hurt him in the top lane. That was like his main item into. I'm pretty sure you just you skipped Trinity. I can't remember. I play this champion as well. But yeah, like you went like Eclipse, Trinity, Standard Sky, Steric, or you skipped Trinity and you could go like Standard Sky, Steric, and that would be like your main kind of like core within the top lane. Within jungle, you tended to skip Eclipse, you tend to just go Trinity. But yeah, within the top lane, he's definitely been hit by a lot of the nerfs towards bruiser itemization. Probably sits at the top of the B tier at this point. Yeah, the nerfs would definitely hurt him. Singed is going to be within the A tier, so Singed, still a relatively performant top laner, bit of a niche playstyle, not particularly popular, but like Liandry's, Rhyolite, Riftmaker still very strong on this champion. If you're able to get ahead, you can take over games on this pick. He does a huge amount of damage. If you're able to get like Magi stacks and like just run through team comps, and I put him as a solid A tier pick. Vayne is also going to be within the A tier. Once again, slightly better than Twisted Fate within mid to low elo. Still relatively hard to pilot. If you do find yourself struggling and getting punished, then I would recommend other picks over Vayne. But if you're able to really like use your tempo and your advantage in laning phase to kind of like translate into a lot later on, like your mid-game team fights can be really hard to play against. Your side laning can be really obnoxious. If you're able to consistently like 1v2, maybe even 1v3 if they don't have great tools to do with you, then there is lots of value to this pick. You're looking at like the Fleet, Storm Razor variation, where you just like utilize your movement speed to like run around team comps. Yeah, she's a great A tier option. Poppy, also going to be in the A tier. She is really unpopular within the top lane, but I'm genuinely surprised that she is a great answer to a lot of the picks here. I play Poppy, like I really enjoy this champion. I think I'm honestly willing to bet a lot of Poppy's unpopularity comes from the fact that she goes Corrupting Pot. It primarily is like her first item or as her starter item of choice, which is not something people enjoy doing. Like Corrupting Pot has been really unpopular for a while. You can work around this. I go D-Shield with both Scorch and Mana Flow to help with the mana problems, which is why you originally went Corrupting Pot. And you can function on this. If you're really struggling, of course, Tear can be something you opt into, but you don't really need it. And then, yeah, like the likes of Sunfires, Iceborne, builds like that can be really nice on Poppy. You're not really going to be going the AD Bruiser variant anymore. The Sun Sky and Stark both being nerfed definitely did hurt this variation. And yeah, she's still a solid tank pick. Great as a counter pick to the likes of Aurelia and a lot of the high mobility AD top laners. Aurelia is going to be in the A tier. Still, once again, hardbound to Bork. Sundered Sky being nerfed has definitely put her down towards the bottom of the A tier and honestly close to the B tier. They nerfed. Well, Bork is still your standard. They nerfed Sundered Sky, which tended to be your second option. Wait or Shilbo, I believe, can now fit this space into like the kind of matchups which you wanted in. And then Steric's also being nerfed is definitely hard as like a third item slot. You can also go the likes of Death Stance though here and just skip out Steric's. Especially if you're not being really, like, you don't need to utilize the shield as much and you don't really need the health and you'd rather just snowball throughout the game, which Death Stance is better within that space. Aurelia, probably towards the bottom of the A tier at this point. Fiora, great as a counter pick. I wouldn't really recommend playing her unless you're very confident in your ability to snowball throughout the game. If you fall behind on this champion, it can be very hard to navigate team fights. If you're behind on the split push, she loses most of her value. You can still go the Ravenous, Trinity, Hullbreaker variation. I believe that it tends to be her standard core at this point, as it gives you a lot of split push capability and can make you very oppressive on sides. Sits within the A tier at the moment. Tryndamere, solid A tier option. It can still work with the likes of Lethal Tempo, Kraken Slayer, and like your like Navori variations. I believe you can go Navori and then just go down like a more bruiser heavy route, or you can just go some more crit items. He's not particularly popular, but yeah, still a solid A tier option. Jack's going to be in the A tier. Great into Twisted Fate. Fleet is underrated on this champion. You can opt into the likes of Grasp or Lethal Tempo still. However, Fleet tends to be relatively strong, allows you to like maintain speed on E, allowing you to CC people more more reliably. It also makes you a bit safer within laning phase. You tend to be more mid-game skewed, but yeah, you're a great answer to a lot of ranged picks where you can make use of Counter-Strike, which is a very strong ability. Renekton is your bread and butter A tier top laner. He is relatively safe, relatively simple to play. He has great tools within his kit, the Armor Shred for point-and-click CC, Dominus giving you a large health pool and allowing you to sustain for a lot of damage. The itemization is nerfed, like the clips being nerfed, the Sterix being nerfed have definitely hurt him, but you can still go the likes of Cleaver, and then even like lethality options can be something you opt into if you're going like a PTA into a squishy comp route. But yeah, very solid bread and butter A tier top laner. So Aatrox is probably low A now, like he's getting close to B. There was another bug fix which hurt Aatrox this patch. You might have realized that Aatrox W isn't as reliable as it used to be. Back when they did the tether changes, it really hurt him, but the damage would still sometimes go through even if they weren't pulled back. That damage no longer goes through, so he is once again nerfed this patch. It's getting real close to the B tier. He's definitely struggling with these changes for losing reliability on his W, and people buying boots more frequently into his champion has definitely put him down a bit. He is close to the B tier, but you still go like the lethality route, especially now that the Bruiser route has been nerfed. The Prowler's Claw, the Edge of Night, Prowler's Claw, the Profane Hydra, the Edge of Night, Schroeder's Grudge, stuff like this can all work really nicely on this pick still. Moving on, Alawi is still going to be within the A tier. She is still very oppressive into a lot of the tanks. If you're able to consistently land E and just output a huge amount of damage, it is very hard to play against this champion. If you're not able to find that reliability, it's not really worth playing Alawi in that game, but her oppressive nature on sides where she can comfortably 1v3 if you're able to get good ultimate positions down. Her builds are still relatively decent, the likes of Iceborne still function quite nicely on this champion, and it puts her in a solid spot on the A tier. Shen, once again, climbed the tier list a couple of patches ago, back when they did the passive changes, which really helped him. Alongside that, I believe they gave him 4 more base AD. If you go the Heartsteel build, probably close to S tier. Other than that, still a solid option, great for supporting your allies and your team. His dueling potential is now back up within laning phase, and that has definitely helped him be a more successful champion. Warwick is still a cheesy A tier pick. You are still going the likes of Flash Barrier or Ignite Barrier in certain situations. If you're able to snowball, get advantages, just really use your oppressive healing on your ultimate, your Q. Be careful of your mana problems, they still do exist, of course. But yeah, Bork, Titanic, Stridebreaker, all solid options on this champion. Great A tier pick. Darius, elite skewed champion. Obviously, I spoke about this last time. Darius, being an early game champion, does make him very high elo elite skewed. Your builds are still relatively similar. The likes of Stridebreaker, very nice on this pick. Gives him very good tools to like latch onto people, apply 5 stacks of bleed, get the ultimate down, and then snowball throughout team fights. He's still very strong, of course, in laning phase, where you can abuse the fact that you have access to a lot of damage. You do want to be ahead of the curve, but yeah, Deadman's still really strong item on him. You tend to go for Stridebreaker, Sterix, Deadman's, Fawn, and then you can go like tanky options, and that tends to be your core. Sterk did get enough this patch, but not enough to really push him down the tier list. He's still a solid A tier option. Teemo is going to be within the A tier. Teemo is still a great A tier pick. A bit of a unique kind of like specialist top laner. His movement speed and lane oppression can be quite hard to play against, especially for low elo players who are maybe not as strong at like spacing between his E and like trying not to just perma have it rotated on you. Of course, second wind D shield is a must take into this champion. Oftentimes you'll be really punished if you do not take this combo. But yeah, he still has really strong build options. The Nashers, the Leandries, Malignants, all great items on him. And you can kind of pick around what runes you want within the game. I know a lot of people like PTA, Fleet, Dark Harvest, even Grasp, how that's kind of died out at this point. There are still a lot of solid options on Teemo, and he's a solid A tier pick. Actually, I'm going to leave Tom Kench for the moment. Zac is also going to be within the A tier. He got nerfed on 14.8. It definitely hurt him within the top lane. He's no longer as successful as a top lane pick, especially if you're not able to consistently pick up your blobs. There's still definitely value to this champion. He does a lot of AP damage. He is a great engage option. If you're ahead, it can be very hard to play against Zac, as the sustain is monstrous. If you're not able to have accessibility to anti-heal, it can also be very hard to play against this champion. Moving on, so actually, I miss Kennen. Kennen is probably sitting close to the bottom of the A tier, high B tier. I'm not willing to move him up to the A tier yet. However, next patch I might. It really depends on how like the changes have shaped up. It's really hard to measure just how much like animation changes and like smoothness of kit adjustments like really adjust to a champion, but he has definitely benefited from this. His ultimate now being able to be casted whilst moving rather than having to stop to cast this spell has definitely made him feel a lot nicer to play. And honestly, I could see him moving up to the A tier, but for the moment, he's going to be in the B tier. Definitely a solid AP option here. Was really struggling before, but yeah, the changes have definitely helped him be a bit more consistent, and that is something which Kennen really values. Into the A tier, wrapping up the A tier, I believe we have Kled. Kled was in my S tier. He's still very strong in like the lethality options. I do really recommend going down that route. It makes him very oppressive. However, you do fall off later into the game, especially if you do end up being burstable. A lot of his strength comes from his early game aggression, his ability to tower dive, his strength on lane with Skull. But yeah, he is more of an A tier pick now, but still close to the S tier. Moving on to the S tier, we have Kayle. Kayle is still a great pick if you're looking for something which can consistently scale throughout the game. She spikes relatively early compared to what she used to. Like, you can spike Nash's Rabadon, which is better than like the 3 item spikes of past. Of course, the AD build also spikes quite nicely on Kraken Slayer. Like, you can do a huge amount of damage on like level 11 Kraken Slayer. Of course, if you're going down like the Kraken Slayer Phantom, I believe, and then like AD like tankier route, Cowboys has made a guide on this. There are kind of like options there. Of course, you can just go like standard AD where you're going like your Kraken, your Ginsu, stuff like this. That can all function quite nicely on this pick. But yeah, Kayle, solid S tier pick at the moment. Great scaling, great carry pick later on into the game. And yeah, lots of strengths in that. Cassiopeia, great at kiting a lot of the top lane pool. That is her real value here. Her scaling, her strengths with kiting, flash ghost or flash TP tends to be the rune sets. Conqueror tends to be the rune of choice, allows you to output like large amounts of consistent DPS and then heal once you have it fully stacked up. You're still getting the likes of Roa, Seraphs, Rylai, stuff like this all work really nicely on Cassie, and it solidifies her as a solid S tier option. Malphite, a great counter pick into a lot of the AD pool. His simplicity also gives him so much value. I really enjoy playing Malphite into like comps where I know I could get a lot of value out of this pick. When playing him into a lot of AP options, you can really struggle. That is kind of like his main faltering point. But as a counter pick option, straight S tier, close to S plus option. Moving on, so Tahm Kench, I'm actually going to add to the S tier. So Tahm Kench has been performing really well as of recent. This is Wizard Frog. If you're not familiar with this is where you go Heartsteel into Swifties, into Riftmaker, Protobelt, Rabadon, and then you can kind of flex around last slot item, but it is finding a lot of success within mid and low elo. Tahm Kench as a champion really falls off Masters Plus. It's really aggressive actually. You don't tend to see a lot of high elo Tahm Kenches other than Noam Watley, who seems to be like one of the main ones, if not the main one on EU West. But yeah, there's definitely merit to playing this champion, especially if you are within mid elo. He is probably he is a great ticket into Masters, but you're going to struggle past that. Mordekaiser, still a solid S tier option. Still has loads of value with his ultimate, great into a lot of the tankier options, does fall off high elo, that has always been where he struggles. You can't play into ranged champions very well as this pick, like you will get bodied by most Vayne players, that is just how that matchup goes. So do be careful utilising him as like a blind pick. I really wouldn't recommend it. As a counter pick, he is still a great option. Yeah, S tier worthy option, in fact. Camille, also going to go into the S tier, so Camille performing really well at the moment. It's the best elite skewed low, just like high mid low like functionality pick in the game at the moment. She can function across most elos. Like I would usually put high skill champions lower down, but Camille is really overperforming at the moment. If you're able to get her into good matchups, she can be very oppressive to play against. Her tools are very strong, the Trinity, the Ravenous, and then you can kind of flex around with your next lot of items. It really depends on the game state. But yeah, she's really deserving of an S spot at the moment. And I'd really recommend playing Camille. She is great fun to play. Yorick is going to be added to the S tier as well. Okay, so I spoke about this last time, or a couple of patches ago, I can't remember when, about the merits of going lethality and the merits of going bruiser. don't always default on lethality. I will always say this: if you default on lethality every game, you are making this champion considerably worse. If you can pick the games to go bruiser, where you are going to get blasted down, you're not able to consistently output as much damage with lethality builds, whether that's because you're into like tankier compositions, or people are relatively strong at like dodging your skill shots, which is where a lot of power comes from, your E into ghoul kind of like power combo. But yes, the bruiser variant works quite nicely, but the lethality variant is still not bad. Like, there is still merit to playing this, especially if you are able to consistently land E, just output a huge amount of damage. Like, your split push potential is really aggressive on both variations, to be honest. And it makes them really valuable, especially with low elo, where people are punished a lot more, like against Maiden. They don't understand how Maiden functions a lot of the time, and it definitely gives him a lot of value there. He does fall off the higher rank you go, but as a mid elo pick, York is a perfect champion for the most part. Argot is going to get dropped down to the S tier. He probably falls within the middle of the S tier. His armor growth went down, and Sterix got nerfed, which definitely hurt this champion a decent amount, and it puts him down within the S tier. He's still a great option. At 3 items, you are incredibly oppressive within the game. This is the Hullbreaker Cleaver Sterix combo. Gives him so much value. At level 13, you are an incredibly strong champion. He will fall off later on into the game, but you can still function on items like Jack Show Deadman's, Jack Show Fon, depending on the game. Of course, we saw Brippo play it at MSI yesterday. It looked pretty decent, of course. But there were problems with Brippo playing at MSI. I wouldn't really recommend using that as a good example, but yeah, I got really strong champion with a mid elo at the moment, just no longer as S plus worthy as before. Nasus gonna sit towards the top of the S tier. Nasus is, well, after his buffs, is in a great spot. He is really hard to play against if you are able to stack and you're able to just stat check almost every top laner in the game. If you do get punished, which you don't really until like higher up, and it does become a bit hard to play the champion, but people are even finding success Masters Plus on this pick, and there is a lot of value to it. So he is deserving of a high S tier spot. Garen is going to sit at the bottom of the S tier. He is still doing fine. Like the Stride Breaker, I believe Phantom second build tends to be his best performance. You can then go into the likes of Deadman's or Deadman's second, and then Sterix nerfed, but still a solid option on this pick if you do really value that shield. Of course, there are good crit variations, and crit Garen does find a lot of success once you go the likes of Stridebreaker into the likes of Phantom Dancer, RFC, IE. People have made guides on this as well, like more recently. There is a analysis of Korea solo queue guy who's like done a guide on Garen, which I would really recommend watching. It can be quite informative. I mean, you obviously won't understand it if you don't speak Korean, but he covers the builds, and that can be quite interesting to watch. And then wrapping up the last 3 champions, so Set sits in the middle of the S tier, still a great option at the moment. Stridebreaker really valuable on this champion. Sterix did get nerfed, but still a great option. And then there are different build variations which you can go down, and he's finding a lot of success. He's still very much early game skewed, but he is relatively simplistic to play. If you're able to get advantages, it can be very hard to play against Set, and he can oftentimes close out games relatively early. Whether this is through like split pushing or team fighting, yeah, lots of strengths to this pick. Trundle gonna sit within the S tier as well. A great split push option. He has some of the most absurd tower damage within the game. You have to secure void grubs on this pick. If you're able to do that, you can oftentimes win games within 20 minutes. If you get your Triforce, your Ravenous, your Hullbreaker, stuff like this, yeah, he's an incredibly oppressive side lane pick, and it can be very obnoxious to play against, but there is lots of value to that. 2 champions left, so Mundo, I'm going to put him in the S plus tier. He is now solo S plus tier. He is the best mid elo, low elo pick at the moment. His ability to kind of just shrug off a lot of damage, if you can like be safe throughout laning phase and then get your heart still, you tend to just spike at that point and be able to just stat check most top laners. His scaling, of course, is incredible. He has some of the most aggressive scaling in the game as a tank. His level 16, I still don't get why this is a thing, but like being able to amp both your healing, or both the healing part of your ultimate and the bonus health part of your ultimate by 5%, up to 25%, that is based on the enemies around you. is an absurd thing to have in his kit, and it's such a weird like rank 16 kind of thing, because like most people aren't even cognitive of this, which yeah, it gives him a huge amount of value at level 16. But before that, he can still spike really nicely, heart still till that point, and yeah, he is very much deserving of an S+ sport. Incredibly easy to play, great split push potential, great team fight potential, does a huge amount of damage. Yeah, the best mid elo pick at the moment. And Skarner is going to sit within the C tier. Skarner got hit pretty heavily this patch. The hotfix brought him down to like low A, high B. The nerfs this patch have brought him down to C tier. He's really struggling with the top lane now. Losing a lot of damage on his Q has definitely hurt him there, but still a solid jungle option, just not as solid within the top lane, and yeah, deserving of a C tier spot. And those are my thoughts for the mid elo top lane tier list. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.